Good morning. You have made your way to our one and only health seminar for camp meeting. We're glad you're here. And my name is Brad Cawley. I'm the Health Ministries Director for the Carolina Conference. And we're so happy to have Lynell, LaMountain here with us. He's our Union Director for Health Ministries. He's also a co-host of Faith for Today. And as you can read in the program, Faith for Today has a wide viewership of about 4 million a week. I think predominantly on TBN and other TV channels like that. Yes. So we're so happy to have him. We're happy to have you. And if you looked at some of the titles for this week's seminar, they're very intriguing. And so I'm really looking forward to it. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Pastor LaMountain to come up here, and then I'm going to have prayer to start our meeting together. And when you come in, you'll see a white handout, which is going to be the same handout for the rest of the week. And there's going to be a different green handout for each day. And I'm asking that you would just take one of these per family as far as the green handout. The white one, we have plenty of those. But as far as the green ones, just one per family because we just have about 80. So one per family, if you don't mind, for that. Okay, we'll put more white ones out there pretty soon. All right, come on up.
Sure.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we're thanking you today for a day of life. And today we want to talk about health. And we're asking that you would be with our speaker, Elder LaMountain, as he presents, and be with us as we listen. We pray that you will be glorified and that you would help us to be more effective tools in your hand for ministry and also for personal stewardship. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Brad. Well, good morning, everybody. You having a good Monday so far? I mean, how can you not look at the beautiful lake, beautiful, Camp Junaluska, Carolina camp meeting has the reputation for being like one of the best camp meetings in North America, doesn't it? I mean, people from all over the place come here. So I really appreciate being here. It's been 24 years since I was last year. I think in 1993 I might have done early teens, but it's good to be back. And I really want to say thank you to Brad for all the work he's done to organize this health seminar this week and the conference leadership. Elder Leslie Louie and the team. I mean, this is really a blessed conference and faithful membership, and it's just really inspiring to be here. Thank you for being a part of the health seminar this week. This week we're going over Creation Health. How many people here have heard about Creation Health? Quite a few of you. So you know it's an acronym standing for those 8 categories: choice, rest, environment, activity, trust, interpersonal relationships, outlook, and nutrition. And what we'll do this week is we'll go through all 8 of those between now and Friday morning. Today we're going to do an overview of what's happening in America and also do choice. Then tomorrow will be rest and environment. I'm going to mix things up on Wednesday. We're going to do activity and nutrition on Wednesday, trust and interpersonal relationships on Thursday, and then we're going to finish Friday morning with outlook. And in my opinion, outlook is the most important one of the 8. So if you're going to skip some, please don't skip Friday morning. We're dedicating the whole time to that. And outlook, by the way, is not people choosing to use positive language or positive thoughts. It goes much, much, much deeper than that. And this is in my work, I see that's where people make the shifts and changes they need to make, is in outlook. So my name is Lynell LaMountain. I am the Health Ministries Director for the Southern Union Conference. Before being invited to take this role, I worked at Florida Hospital for a number of years. I've been working with them in Adventist Health System since 2005. They called me up and invited me to be a part of developing the Creation Health program for churches and schools. And I'd say since 2005, I've taught Creation Health a few hundred times and done a few Creation Health Train the Trainers, a few hundred of those too, and probably written about 1,000 pages on Creation Health. That being said, I'm not a clinical person. I'm not a doctor. This was designed for people like us. I know we have clinical people in the room, but this was designed for people like us to take a program, to be able to deliver it without having to have that experience. So one of the confusing things this morning might be you're getting the outline on choice, which we're going to go over with the last third of the program, but you're also having this white sheet, the Quick Start Guide. I know every time I do Creation Health, there are people in the room who are interested in doing this at their local church. This is for those of you who might be interested in doing Creation Health at your church or school. If you're not interested, you can just put it back on the chair. You can order Creation Health right now from creationhealth.com. If you do that, this answers a lot of the questions that I get when people first start doing it. Now, here's the thing. If at the end of the morning or sometime this week you think you might be interested in doing this, if you remind me, I might ask you at the end if you think this might be something you'd be interested in teaching. If you are, I'll make a call to Florida Hospital and see if they'll give us a discount on the Creation Health Seminar Kit. I haven't done that. Oftentimes, they will give a 20% discount, which saves like $80. I also know that most conferences are allowing churches to use evangelism funds to do Creation Health because Creation Health is a friendship evangelism seminar. It's taking health and using health as an excuse to go make friends so you can continue that relationship in your church with other things your church might be doing. Does that make sense? So it's pretty easy. So, I live in Orlando, Florida with my wife, Jennifer. We have a son who'll be 10 in July, and Jennifer works with Faith for Today. She's the Director of Development. You'll see Mike Tucker. He comes in on Thursday. He'll be speaking Thursday night. Mike's a really close friend of mine. We just finished filming Season 4 of Lifestyle Magazine. You know, a lot of people think Faith for Today doesn't exist any longer, but it does, and it's the second longest running television show in America, second only to Meet the Press. But the reason why Adventists oftentimes don't know Faith for Today still exists is because it's not been called Faith for Today for a long... it's still Faith for Today Ministries, right? Has always been, but the name of the show changed through the years, and it's called Lifestyle Magazine. And so just Google Lifestyle Magazine. It's on 250 channels across the United States and actually internationally televised. And we have about 4 million weekly viewers. And what's cool is this ministry is actually influencing people who aren't churched, who aren't necessarily religious. These are folks who are just wanting to have a better quality of life. So if you use Lifestyle Magazine in your church, you're actually reaching a demographic of people the church doesn't normally reach. And we had a really interesting season that we just wrapped 3 weeks ago. I guess it's the first week or second week of May. It was really, really, really fun. So, but you can look at that. Okay. Creation Health. The fundamental text, the promise of Creation Health is John 10:10. I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. My question to you is this. When you look at people and how they're living, is this their reality right here? It doesn't seem to be, does it? So I won't ask you to answer this, but you answer it to yourself silently because I want you to be honest. When you look at people in the church, does that seem to be the reality they're experiencing? And in my travels and work with people throughout the world, I see a lot of worry, concern, anxiety. In fact, the number one prescription drug in the church is antidepressants. So you see that, so that leads me to ask you this. Is that promise of Jesus Christ meant for now, or is it meant for when he returns at his second coming? It's meant for now. So there's a reason why we're not experiencing this now. If we should be experiencing it now and we're not, is it his fault? Or is it maybe there's a disconnect on our part when it comes to living this health message? There's a disconnect. When I was at Florida Hospital a few years back, I think it was 2010 maybe, the 6 living surgeons general were giving Adventist Health System an award, Excellence in Health. And so they all showed up at the Florida Hospital campus, which is the main campus, downtown Orlando, if you've ever driven by it on I-4. It's on Princeton Street. And it was really fascinating for me. I was so glad I went, because each of those surgeons general were given 10 minutes to give what they thought was happening in health in the United States. And only 10 minutes. And I took notes fast and furious, and there are 3 things in particular I want to share with you that really seem to concern them. One thing they said was, this really isn't a concern, this is good news. For every dollar you invest in your health and well-being, you will save $14 in health care costs somewhere along the span of your lifetime. $1 saves $14. Now, if you gave me $1 and I gave you $14 back, how many times a day would you want to make that trade with me? All day long, right? So if you're wondering whether or not you can afford that extra dollar, spend the extra dollar. Because you're going to save, they said 14. Now, in my research with Florida Hospital, I'd read every dollar you spend on your health, you will save $4 to $7 in health care costs. Even that, it's a pretty good return, isn't it? They said 14, they're the experts, so 14. Nobody seems to know how to fix health care in America, so anything you can do to make yourself healthier is really, really good. Second thing they said was that obesity is now considered to be a threat to national security. It's like, how can that be? And the reason why it's a threat to national security is this. As our men and women leave the armed forces, the general population is so sick and weak, they cannot replace those folks adequately. So there's a deficit. And the people that are defending our nation right now, sure, budget's a part of it, but health is another part of it. People aren't strong enough, they're not well enough to serve and protect our country because they're obese, they have type 2 and type 1 diabetes, and high blood pressure and all of those things. The third thing they said, and this really concerned them, was this. They said healthcare costs have been doubling every generation like clockwork. 2 generations ago, healthcare costs were 4% of our gross domestic product. Last generation, they were 8%. This generation, 16%. And they're projecting that in the next generation, 32. The one after that, they'll be 64. They're saying 3 generations from now, healthcare costs will be 128% of our gross domestic product. And you don't have to be Dave Ramsey to figure out that's unsustainable. We cannot spend 128% on healthcare when all we make is 100% when it comes to our gross domestic product. You see? So you can see why Washington has been struggling to try to figure out how to fix this. Because the money is not there to take care of everybody's health in this country when you look 20, 40, 50 years out from now. It's not there. And yes, we believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ, and hopefully that is sooner than we can possibly imagine or hope for. But if it is delayed, then this country is facing some pretty serious times ahead. And that's why the government, at the end of the day, is trying to do all it can to put pressure on us to take responsibility for our own health. And so what they've done is, and I don't know what's going to happen moving forward, I think some exciting things will happen. I say exciting only because I'm thinking of my dear friend. He is a former senior pastor of a Baptist church in Orlando, Todd Lampier. He was just invited by the White House, well, a few months ago, he and the pastoral staff he's working on now, to lead out in faith community health programs across the country. And he knows Creation Health. He uses Creation Health. I taught him Creation Health. So to think that Creation Health might be even more, used in the country is exciting because this is the Adventist health message. And when the government, when Washington has any conversation on health, who do they make sure is a part of those conversations? The Seventh-day Adventist Church. They want to know what we have to say, what we have to think, because the Lord has blessed us with over 160 years of health reform that actually works. And that doesn't just work here in the United States. The health message works anywhere in the world it's deployed, unlike other health messages from people. So anyway, he's going to be leading out in that, and I think there's some exciting things to come. But what the government has done in the past few years is they've actually made it possible for churches and schools, nonprofits, to write up grant proposals and get money to take health education classes to their communities to try to make a difference with what's happening in this country, because this country is sick. And I'm going to show you some maps here in a second. It's sick. In fact, let's just get into it. Obesity trends. This is not a lecture on obesity, but you can use this as an example of what's happening. So these maps, we started tracking obesity in 1985. The way you read the map is the lighter the color, the less the percentage of obesity is in that state. The darker the color, the higher the percentage. So you see over here, you have, in 1985, 10 to 14% of the deep blue state, dark blue states were obese. So that's how you read it. Let's just go fast. And you tell me if you see it getting better or getting worse. A little worse or a lot worse? Now, I don't know what happened between 1998 and 1999, but look at this. Almost half the country bumped up to 20% of their states being clinically obese. New color added. You can keep your state on Mississippi. It's in our union. Adventist Health System and Gulf States Conference and South Central Conference have been trying to do a lot of work in Mississippi because it kind of leads the nation in the worst, when it comes to obesity, the worst statistics. Which, the good news is, wherever you see these bad statistics, that's a window of opportunity for the church to make a difference. That's actually, it's not good news for those folks, but it's really good news in the sense that we can make a difference. That's another bad jump. 2003 to 2004, 25% of those red states obese. Now you can't see it. There's new color added. Mississippi here, Louisiana, I know. That's purple. You can't see it with this color scheme. 30% of their state is obese. Now, these maps came from the National Institutes of Health, NIH.com. You can dig around on there and get them updated. When you go there, sometimes they change their color scheme. Just know, the color scheme changes, you'd really need to watch the percentages so you're not messing up. Like the color scheme changed for Mississippi in 2006 versus what it was in 2005. But even though it changed, the percentage is the same, 30%. I'm only going to go through 2010. You get the idea, right? Yeah, the map is just getting worse and worse and worse and worse with each passing year. And it's so bad that 3 years ago, the CDC actually used the term epidemic when it comes to obesity. This is not a lecture on obesity, but this is what's really scaring the surgeons general that are monitoring this and watching this. In fact, if I show, they have the same maps for diabetes. We'll show you those maps today. It's the same exact pattern. An epidemic going across the country, which is not a surprise because although I'm not clinical, when you study the research on obesity, it's the foundation for what other types of diseases. Diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, all these things. So it's not good. And what was interesting in a scary way was while I was at Florida Hospital, hearing the doctors talk about these kids coming in 12, 13, 14 years old being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And that's really frightening because when you're diagnosed, say, as a teenager, early teenager with type 2 diabetes, your risk for kidney failure and neurological diseases at the age of 30 is really, it skyrockets. So these kids, their life is not looking good if they don't take charge and make some changes. 1990, things weren't too bad. By 2010, things are falling apart. Really is what's happening. There are many reasons why this map in 2010 looks this way. One reason would be, we started talking about food deserts back in 2010 at Florida Hospital. Have you heard of food deserts? So I got a call from a church in Jacksonville, Florida. My last church was Jacksonville Mandarin Church. I was there for 8 years. And so the church, South Point Church, called me up. And they said, I want to tell you that we've been working with public school kids, trying to figure out a way to let them know that someone is caring for them and loving them and thinking about them. So we started meeting them at their bus stops in the morning. And they said, we noticed that these kids were coming to the bus stop with a breakfast in hand, and that breakfast was a Coca-Cola and a bag of potato chips. And they said, so we realized early on, one way we could practically help these kids would be to offer an after-school dinner, a healthy supper. And so they started doing that. And what they found out as they started providing one meal a day to these kids so they could have something healthy is that the only grocery store in that area that this church was targeting to minister to had gone out of business or shut its doors like 4 years previously. And the only place that these people had to shop for groceries, many of them didn't have cars to rely on buses to go anywhere. The only place they could do their grocery shopping for their family was the 7-Eleven or the racetrack. It was a gas station where they're buying groceries for their kids. They did not have access to healthy food. So think of what type of health your family would be in if you were stuck shopping for groceries at the gas station. Which is why, so you go to these gas stations and you see these bowls of bananas and apples and fruit and stuff. So the government a few years ago started giving subsidies to business people in those areas where they could buy fruit and at least have that available at an affordable cost so these folks can have something healthy to eat. So one reason why these maps are this way is because we have food deserts throughout this country where people don't have access to quality, healthy food. It's a reality that you and I probably aren't exposed to and even think of. We have it really easy compared to a lot of people in this country. Second reason is because, the food industry. They're not your friend. Now, I'm not a food Nazi. I'm pretty middle of the road when it comes to my diet. I'm not one of these, got to get rid of all sugar and all of this and all of that. Okay, so don't worry about that from me. But what I don't like is, I don't like an industry that intentionally tries to create a food for us that addicts us so they have a customer for life. In fact, when you listen to Dr. White, W-H-Y-T-E from Loma Linda, he's a practicing therapist out there. He's like an expert on addictions and neurology and things like this. He says these food companies, they have whole research and development teams designed to make sure the food is very pleasant as you consume it. And they actually they'll engineer ingredients that kind of disengages the mind where it's like a pathway to addiction. And they don't even have to be that subtle. They know if they get the correct ratio of salt, sugar, and fat just perfectly, it's going to be pretty addictive in and of itself. But when you look at the food industry for the last 25 years, I'm not a clinical person, I'm not a registered dietitian, but what I have seen is an increase in the use of high fructose corn syrup. I don't want that in my body. I'm not a food Nazi. I'm balanced. I'm vegetarian, not vegan. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm being transparent. So I'm not one of these who makes a religion out of my diet. But I'm here to tell you, I don't want it in my system because of things I've seen in research that it does. Another thing that they'll use, and you have to be like Columbo to figure this out. Shows you how old I am. Columbo. Anyone remember the TV show Columbo? At least I didn't say Sherlock Holmes. Have you heard of MSG? They try to stick MSG, it seems like, in almost everything. And the thing is, MSG can be, they can call MSG 60 different names. So if you're looking for MSG, you're going to miss it. I've heard some people say the food industry can label it using 200 different names. Now, here's the thing with MSG. When they want to fatten up rats, guess what they give them? MSG. There's an MSG protocol to make rats fat so they can do studies on them. So you have these food deserts that's causing these maps to look this way, but you have the food industry, which is not your friend. So you really need to look at the ingredients, not because you're trying to make a religion out of your diet, but to make sure that you're in charge of what you're putting into your body and you're making informed choices. Because you don't want to be addicted and you don't want to have these foods create these terrible, horrible side effects, which some of them do, some of these ingredients do. There's a third reason, though, and I think we're going to tie it into a fourth reason here in a few minutes. I know we're going to tie it into it, but I'll just say this. I'll leave it at this. So I was listening to some people talk about health, and here's what their response was. And, it was this crass. They said that if they get sick, they'll just go to the doctor and get a pill. So that seems to be a prevailing attitude with people in the country today. You get sick, you'll get some medicine. You get sick, you'll go get a surgery. But the thing is, you realize the side effects of some of these medicines? They have this new one, I forget what it's called. We've been seeing commercials now for a few months to treat type 2 diabetes. The side effects sound worse than diabetes. When it comes to health is not disease prevention. Health is not the absence of disease. Health is having the energy and vitality and stamina that you need to live life to the fullest. It's having the energy and stamina that you want and need to live your life for God and enjoy those closest to you while making a difference in this world. If all you're looking at health is to prevent disease, you're only getting one half the picture. Health is being fully alive from the inside out with vibrancy and energy and vitality, and that's what I want. I don't just want to prevent disease. I want to be alive and full of life till the day that Jesus comes. Okay, so we're going to get into the fourth reason in just a couple of minutes. Review for many of you, lifestyle disease. 8 of the 10 leading causes of death are because of lifestyle in the United States. Leading killers are coronary artery disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure. The question for you is, as a general statement, are those diseases preventable? Yes. We're killing ourselves by how we eat and how we drink. Lifestyle disease. Now, I'd like you to evaluate yourself. I don't want you to tell me, because I want you to be honest. We're going to go through like 6 or 8 lifestyle habits that create disease. And I want you to ask yourself if in your life any of these are operating. Number 1, poor eating habits. We all struggle with eating habits every once in a while. I get this, especially if you travel. Little or no exercise. We're going to talk about exercise on Wednesday. But depending on the research that you cite, and I'm going to show you a slide on Wednesday, they say that a lack of exercise is the #1 cause of death. It's like right there with obesity or smoking. But we can argue about that in debates vigorously. But the point is, lack of exercise is a big deal. And statistics say that 7 out of 10 people don't get any physical activity. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday, but, I was looking out my window this morning. I exercise this morning. I try to exercise every day, except for Sabbath. I'd like to have one day where I get my body rest. But you've seen a number of people walking and jogging around the lake. You must have like a healthy culture in this conference, because I've seen more people exercising here than I normally see where I go. Lack of sufficient rest. Lack of sufficient rest is a pattern I see in the church, especially amongst people like you who are dedicated members. You're not just here at camp meeting. My guess is many of you have leadership roles at your church at home. And there are younger families, too, who have leadership roles at the church, but they're working. Husband's working, wife is working. There's just no time left over for anything. They don't feel like they have time to get the rest that they need. Sustained exposure to chronic stress. This familiar to anybody? Stress once in a while is okay. We actually need it probably once in a while to keep up on our game, but sustained exposure to chronic stress just burns you out and wears you down. Makes you do things that you otherwise wouldn't do. Risky behaviors such as smoking and drug use. Probably not a big problem in this room, but we could add to that overeating, and we could add not exercising. We could add workaholism to that list, by the way. Minimal to no playtime or time for solitude. You are so busy helping everybody else, you have no time left over for yourself. You've been wanting to play the guitar, but it's been sitting against the wall for 14 months now with a broken string. Me. Got a guitar for Christmas. Christmas of 2015. Still haven't had my first lesson. That's changing. Limited family or meaningful relationship time. This is another pattern I see in the church. Especially, because people are just giving so much to, what do we call this? Whose work? The Lord's work. So it's very, very, very important. And there isn't anything that we won't do for the Lord's work, right? The day will come, I believe, when we'll be asked to sacrifice, make big sacrifices for the Lord's work. We have Christian brothers and sisters in this world who are making those sacrifices right now. In fact, there's a busload of Christians just murdered a couple of days ago in Egypt, if you saw the news. For no other reason than they believe in Jesus. Here in our country, at this time, God is not asking us to make that particular decision. This one is close to my heart because I see families struggling in the church. I know what people tell me when they're talking with me in confidence. I know what members are telling me. I know what employees are telling me. And this is a source of pain in the church. I know when I grew up in the church, my dad's a retired pastor. Dad didn't talk much about the leadership or anything in the church, but I'm here to tell you, let me just tell you this. God has given you responsibility of you and your family. That's where you start. That's what you're in charge of. If something's going wrong in your family, don't worry about what's going on out there. You go take care of home first. You need to spend time with your family. You need to cherish your family. You need to nurture your family. You need to lead your family. And if that's not happening, you don't need to worry about the job the church is asking you to do. You need to go take care of your family. It comes first. Because when resurrection morning comes along, the first person you're going to go look for is not going to be your pastor. It's going to be your wife, your husband, your kids, your grandkids, your siblings. Those are the folks you're going to be looking for on that morning, hoping that they're there with you for eternity. And if they're that important on that morning, they're that important today. And you need to give them your time. You need to give them your best. That's what God expects of you and me. The church has kind of changed, I think, to some degree on this. Changed for the better, because when I was a kid growing up, so Dad, never saw Dad. He's either writing a sermon, he was at a committee, or he's out visiting or at a meeting of some kind. So I remember one day, it was after school, must have been around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, walk home. We were in Beaumont, Texas at the time. And he just collapsed on the floor, writhing in agony. And Dad, for about 20 years, they'd been treating him for what they thought he had, was ulcers. They thought he had an ulcer, duodenum ulcer. And but I knew Dad thought that this was really, really, really serious, because my dad, and you'll hear his story on Friday, Dad's not a very expressive person. And he's sitting there in pain like I never saw him in, and he says, "I love you, Lynell." I knew as soon as I heard him say he loved me, this wasn't good, because Dad never said, he wasn't a mean man, he wasn't an unloving man, but he never said he loved you. So the ambulance comes, they take him away, he goes to the hospital. This is 1970, probably 78. Take him to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and they cut him open. In those days, they didn't have the technology we have today, so they cut him open from sternum down to his belly button to find out what is going on with him. And the surgeon told us later that when they opened him up, they saw that his gallbladder was just full of gangrene. And as they were taking out I don't know why, as they were taking his gallbladder out, the surgeon said it was just falling apart in his hands, in pieces. And that's what the problem was. My dad had apparently had a gallbladder issue all those years, and not ulcers, but they've been treating him like he had ulcers. So it was a pretty traumatic surgery back in 78 when they didn't have the technology we have today. And so Dad was in the ICU for quite a few. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and I don't know how long he was in the ICU, but I do know. So in the fall of the year, we had a storm in Texas that came through, and the ICU had some trouble, I guess. I don't know why a hospital would be in a situation where this would happen, but like these ceiling tile things, some of them were falling down. And so it was an interesting situation, and Dad's in the ICU trying to recover, and he gets a phone call in the ICU from his conference president. Now, Dad never talked about conference leadership to me. But this really stuck in his mind. This church leader was calling him, and Dad thought to have prayer and see how he's doing, see how this pastor is doing. So this is the fall of year 1978, and those of you who are old enough remember what usually happened in the fall of the year back in those days. There's a certain type of campaign we used to do. So you know why the conference president was really calling him? Want to know how far along his church was on its in-gathering goal? Church had like a $5,000 in-gathering goal. This conference president had to know that Dad was in the hospital because he called the hospital. And had to known he was in the ICU because he was routed to the ICU. And he's talking to my dad, wanting to know about the stupid in-gathering goal. I don't care what the church says or what anybody out there says. This we know. God has given us charge over our families, and they come first. And you need to put them first. And if as a result of being here at camp meeting this week, the one thing you do when you go home is put them first, then your time here was well spent. It's good to serve, and we need to serve. We are called to serve. But you need to put in there time for you and your family. Maybe you plan out a weekend every quarter or something. Go. Do it. Do it. Because what happens is you end up hating the church and God if you're not careful, and you lose yourself in the process. Lack of spiritual connection is the 8th lifestyle disease habit. When this goes, you have no resources at all to deal with anything that life is throwing at you. So of these 8 lifestyle habits, which one, if any, are operating in your life? Poor eating habits, little or no exercise, lack of rest, stress, smoking, overwork, overeating, minimal to no playtime, limited family or meaningful relationship time, or a lack of a spiritual connection. Question, how many people do you think die each year in our country as a result of poor nutrition and lack of physical activity? 500? Well, you're close. It's actually 400,000 people. Almost 500,000 people. How big is Asheville? What's the population of Asheville? Anyone know? How much? 75,000? My goodness. So we're losing about 5 Asheville's a year because of people not eating and not exercising. This is the most important slide in the Creation Health material that I've seen in 12 years. I'll show you how you read it. At the top, you have the 10 leading causes of death, which are taken directly from the CDC. CDC.org, CDC.gov, they update this every year, so you might want to make sure you visit it to see because it changes. And then you have the 9 contributing factors. You know, the habits or things that are causing these 10 leading causes of death. And that's really where the information stops from a church point of view, it seems. We talk about heart disease is number 1, cancer 2, stroke 3, all the way over to suicide being number 10. So in our health seminars and health work with the communities, we just talk about these things. We talk about, helping people. Well, we talk about the habits, the bad habits. Tobacco use is number 1, diet and activity number 2, alcohol number 3, all the way on over to illicit drug use. So being number 9. What we do is we put these seminars together, and so we help people try to break these bad habits, like stop smoking. Should we help people stop smoking? Yes, we should. We help them to get active and eat better. Should we do that? Yes, we should. We have addiction recovery programs we try to do to help people. We should be doing all of these things. But here's the thing. As long as our health ministry work is being relegated just to this inner square here, these 9 contributing factors, we're not really dealing with the root cause of why people are doing what they're doing. In my work with people, with health ministry people, they're so frustrated, they say that people know what to do, but they don't do it. There's a reason why they're not doing it, which gets us into these 8 root causes. I have a colleague, her name is Candace Huber. She is the Mission Development Director now for Florida Hospital Waterman. Back when we worked together at Florida Hospital, she and another researcher got together and they did a review of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of studies to see if they could find anything in those studies that would kind of give us an insight as to why people are doing these things. And what they found as the root cause of what's triggering these bad habits in folks are these 8 root causes. Anger and frustration, low self-esteem or self-worth, economic disparity, hopelessness and emotional despair, lack of information or education, meaningless existence, external and internal stress, and a sense of powerlessness and loneliness. Those are 8 common themes they found in the literature that they reviewed. Yes, ma'am. This is in the Creation. She's asking if a printout of this is available. It's in the Creation Health seminar material. So you'd have to buy the Creation Health leader kit to get it. But this also, I think Brad told me, is going to be online, right, tomorrow. So you'll have a review if you want to, look at this online.
CarolinaSDA.org.
Okay.
Yep.
CarolinaSDA.org, if that would help. So what this tells me is you look at this inner square right here, there are actually 2 words that should come to our minds. One is pain. You can't look at that and not realize that people are in severe pain. But it's much deeper than pain. You see, pain is when you have expectations that are not met, or you have rules that aren't met. When your expectations, when your circumstances don't match, don't meet, don't satisfy your expectations, you have pain. So there's pain, but this is deeper than pain. I would say that this is a picture of suffering. This country is a country that's suffering. There's a crisis in our country because it's a country that is suffering. And there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is when your circumstances don't meet your expectations. When that happens, when your circumstances don't meet your expectations, you have pain. When your circumstances don't meet your expectations and you feel powerless to change it, that's suffering. When you don't see any way out, it's suffering. When you believe that it's permanent, it's now transformed from pain into suffering. So what do people do who are in pain, and especially those who are suffering? What are they trying to do with this pain? They medicate it. They try to get rid of it. I mean, that's what we do, right? And especially if you're suffering and you don't see any way out of it, all you're wanting is a few minutes of peace each day, correct? And so they're doing everything they can to just numb that pain. And so we have health ministries directors saying, why aren't they doing what they know they need to be doing? Well, it's because they're in pain. They're suffering. They're suffering with these things. A lot of this is driven by a sense of loneliness. A lot of this is driven by a sense of life's in charge of me. I'm not in charge of life, which we'll talk about Friday morning. As a church, I look at this and I see that Jesus Christ has empowered us and has equipped us to bring healing to these pain points. Because this is what Jesus did, day in and day out, day in and day out. He brought healing to these pain points people were going through that oftentimes is caused by the church. I'm not saying our church is causing this, but when you look at how that church was run back in the day, it was causing a lot of pain and powerlessness and loneliness. So if we're going to make a difference in people's lives, yes, we need to keep teaching them to stop smoking and to eat better and to exercise and have stronger marriages and all of those things. That has to be a part of it. But if we love them, we have to become their friend. We have to care for them. We have to love them. We have to become a part of their life and be a channel of God's grace to them. Because there is a way out. We need to take them by the hand and lead them out. Talk more about that on Friday morning. It's my opinion, and it's my opinion, you may have a different perspective, and that's fine, that the crisis in America regarding health right now is being driven by these things. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but it seems to me like the world is just going insane. I mean, yeah.
For a while now, I've been focusing on time, probably about the past decade.
Yep.
And that's really one of our biggest problems is time.
Time.
Because whether we're a millionaire or whether we're poor as church mouse, we still have 24 hours.
Yep.
But if we do have a lot of money, we usually have our time really packed up tight.
Yep.
So we got to deschedule our lives.
Yep.
Put big gaps in our lives, because if we don't have those gaps, we'll never be able to build relationships with anybody, let alone our family, but
Yep.
anybody else.
Yep.
And that's what we need to relieve these pain points.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're never going to get there.
We need to be available. John Maxwell used to say, maybe he still says it, but I remember him telling us young pastors years ago, walk slowly through the crowds. We got to be available. Got to be present. Got to make some changes, like you just said. All right, what time is it? 9:55. They say never look at your watch, never direct people to the time, but we have about 30 minutes left. We're going to finish choice this morning, too. I might start going fast. Do you think I've been going fast at all so far? Passionate, thank you. CDC, well, first of all, this suicide you see as number 10, that made the list for the first time about 3 or 4 years ago. It's concerned the CDC, so I did a research project in 2011. They found that for kids ages 10 to 24, suicide is the third leading cause of death. 4,400 kids die each year as a result of suicide. They actually did a study in high schools, both private and public, to see if there'd be any difference between private schools or public schools with regards to suicide. Do you think there was any difference? There was no difference at all. What they found was that in grades 9 to 12, 15% of the population in those grades were considering committing suicide. 15% were considering it, based on the CDC. 11% made a plan, and 7% actually try to follow through and take their lives. CDC says every year, 149,000 kids between the ages of 10 and 24 end up in our emergency departments as a result of self-inflicted wounds of them trying to take their lives. This suffering we saw in that inner square a couple slides back, it's affecting our kids. I don't know what it'd be like trying to grow up today as a kid in this world. We always thought it was probably kind of tough and bad. We've not seen anything like our kids are struggling with today. I mean, it is crazy. It's as if the world has lost its mind. It's as if kids are losing their minds. There's no anchor. If there was ever a time the kids, your children and grandkids needed you, it's today. If there's a time the church ever needed to come to their aid and be, a source of encouragement and strength, it's today. They need us. They need us. They need Jesus. They need us. World Health Organization, August of last year, said there are 800,000 suicides a year. Every 40 seconds, someone takes their life. See, the point comes where you've done all you can to numb the pain, and you see that you feel that you're stuck. There's no escape, and you finally say, I'm done. And you take care of it permanently. What this tells me is there's more to health than nutrition and exercise. All my life, I pretty much heard nutrition, 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 nutrition. And I think to some degree it's because we know how to do that, right? I mean, we know how to do a cooking class of some kind. At least we can do that much. Should we stop doing cooking classes? No. So I'm exaggerating here a little bit, but I'm going to say there's more to health than nutrition. I'd also say, this is my perspective, nutrition probably, at least of the 8 that we see in Creation Health, is the least important, but it's important. Do you hear me say that it's important? Okay, but it's the least important. 8 glimpses of a better life involve Creation Health. In fact, the Adventist health message has never been just about nutrition. It's always been about the whole person when you study it. It's what our church has always had to say. In fact, Creation Health, it's an interesting story how it came out to be. Back in the early 90s, there was a little company called Disney, if you've heard of them. And they wanted to build like the perfect subdivision, the perfect neighborhood in the United States called Celebration, Florida. Have you heard of this? As part of that neighborhood, they wanted a world-class hospital. And everybody wanted to be Disney's hospital, including us. It boiled down to, I've heard Des say there were 50, I've heard people say there were 300 people, 300 companies trying to be Disney's hospital. Well, it boiled down to 2 companies, Florida Hospital and its competitor. And it was kind of challenging for the Seventh-day Adventist work in the early 90s for a couple of reasons in Florida. One, you had these people putting up these billboards saying the Pope is the Antichrist and Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. And those billboards were going up between Daytona and Tampa. And so we were getting a very bad reputation. You know what? There's a time and a place for that conversation, and the time and place, I don't care what you say, is not on a billboard on I-4. You know who was our chief defender against that? It was a Catholic priest. Because he'd been visiting Florida hospital campuses for years, visiting his parishioners. And so he actually went to the media and he said, I know what folks are saying about the Adventists, but here's the Adventists I've come to know and love. And he actually defended our church against crazy Seventh-day Adventists. The second thing that was happening, affecting our church throughout the country, was there was a book that had been made into a movie. The movie was called Road to Wellville. I don't know if you remember it. It was based on Battle Creek and John Harvey Kellogg, and the lead was Matthew Broderick, who played John Harvey Kellogg. And it was an embarrassingly shameful movie where they took like the worst of John Harvey Kellogg, all of his idiosyncrasies, and made it look like that's what Battle Creek was all about. Made us look like fruitcakes. They actually turned John Harvey Kellogg into like a cartoon character, a caricature. Despite Hollywood having retained a Seventh-day Adventist historian to make sure they had the accurate details about Battle Creek, they still turned this movie into almost like a comedy. And so what happened was our competitor sent a letter and a book, the book Road to Wellville, to every Disney board member. And they said, we know you're thinking about making a big decision regarding your hospital. We thought this information about the Adventists would help you as you make that decision. Luckily, the Lord had God blesses his work, and he's in charge of his work, despite billboards and movies and books. And he blessed the work at Florida Sanitarium, started there in 1908, and had a good relationship, still has a good relationship in town. And so Disney sent an executive to Florida Hospital and an executive to the other hospital. And I've heard Des tell this story quite a few times, Des Cummings Jr. And so the executive came to the Florida hospital, and he says, Disney wants to know what the Seventh-day Adventist vision for healthcare is in the 21st century, and they want to know, they want you to tell it without using the names John Harvey Kellogg or Ellen G. White. Now, they weren't saying that Ellen G. White could not be a part of that vision. Just in the vision, they didn't want to see that referenced. And the thing is, you kind of get lazy. When you have giants like, I know John Harvey had his problems, right? He has issues, and maybe that's why the church separated from him in 1904. I don't know. But you can't deny the great work that he did and Ellen G. White did. I mean, that's where health reform came from. I mean, if it weren't for them, my goodness, you'd still have doctors prescribing. They were prescribing smoking to deal with coughing. So anyway, Des says the team got together and they said, you know what? Adventist Church has been involved with healthcare since the 1860s, I guess. We have plenty of scientific case studies where we can probably make a good case for a vision for what we see in the 21st century. But we are a Christian, we're a Seventh-day Adventist Christian institution. And so what we're going to have is we're going to have a theological foundation for our vision. And so they did something very simple. These executives at Florida Hospital, and I wasn't there, this is the early 90s, they said, we decided to take our Bibles, open them up, and start reading in Genesis, and we weren't going to stop until we got to Revelation, if it took that long for God to impress upon us his vision for healthcare in the 21st century. So they start reading in Genesis, and I guess depending on how you look at it, luckily for them, they saw God's vision for whole person care in the creation story. But when you stop and think about life, I mean, the word life in John 10:10 is Zoe, which is life as God originally intended. Where might you find his principles for life as he originally intended? The creation story. So in the creation story, they found these 8 principles. They worked them around until they came up with this acronym, and they brought an executive back, and they said, Mr. Stern, we want to share what we believe, what we think is the Seventh-day Adventist vision for healthcare in the 21st century. And they went through these 8 principles. Of these 8 principles, and I know you don't know, which one of the 8 do you think really resonated the strongest with Mr. Stern, this Disney executive, if you were to guess? Yeah, nutrition, you'd think environment, choice, things Disney, activity, but you'd think, a lot of people say environment because Disney is always all about the environment. But it was actually rest. Because what they didn't know was, so the team's talking about rest, how there's physical, mental, and spiritual rest. And as a part of that spiritual rest, there is a Sabbath rest. When they started talking about the Sabbath, this executive eyes, he just lighted up. He was Jewish. He'd been raised a Jew. And he started sharing his favorite Sabbath memories growing up in his Jewish household. And that this was rooted in the Old Testament might have been a pretty good thing as you're communicating to this Jewish executive. So what Florida Hospital said, the Adventist vision for healthcare in the 21st century is we have people coming to our hospitals, they have blood work done, and their blood work's okay, but we see that they're facing chronic stress that doesn't go away. So although they're healthy technically, they're not well. Or they have their blood work done, and it's okay, but we find as we get into their case histories, their families are falling apart, or there's some sort of trauma there. And although they're healthy technically, they're not well. So they said the Seventh-day Adventist vision for healthcare in the 21st century is we want people to be fully alive in mind, body, and soul, not just body, which has always been our health message. And that really was strong to Stern. That was something powerful. To be fully alive in mind, body, and soul, not just body, because everybody else is just out there focusing on the body. But there are things, emotionally and spiritually that actually can compensate for some maybe inadequacies in the body, which we'll see in interpersonal relationships and outlook and things like that. So Stern went back to Disney. He said, we need to have the Adventists as our hospital in celebration. He said the reason why is, the other people are talking about health and they have a good plan, but the Seventh-day Adventists, they wrote a book on health, and we need them to be our hospital. And so God saw fit that the church would get that contract, and the hospital has been very, very effective and successful. In fact, people from all around the world come to that hospital to have certain procedures done. It's really well known for prostate surgeries and things like that. That's not to brag about our hospital. That is to thank God for creating an opportunity for him to use us to reach more people. God is blessing his health work. He's blessing the operational side when it comes to the church. And creation health is something that churches are really, really liking and hospitals are liking. And Loma Linda says if you practice the creation health message, you add on average 10 years of quality years to your life. 10 quality years. I actually say 11 years. I've not updated my slide. We're talking quality years of life. As my parents have gotten older, Dad's going to be 84, I think, this summer. He's born in 1933. Yeah, 84. Mom's 81. You start hearing your folks talk about how they would be okay with resting until Jesus comes. And you figure out that, well, there comes a stage of life where maybe people are kind of tired. And they don't want some of those challenges to keep going on and on and on. And my heart goes out, and I understand. And the great thing about the health message is this isn't just 10 more years of the same. It's 10 or 11 quality years of life. That regardless of where you deploy this health message, this is what happens. It just doesn't happen here. It happens everywhere. And we're just so grateful we can help people have better lives and improved health. The start of it all is with choice. Now, you have this choice outline, and as we go through these slides, I hope to fill in some of the answers. You'll see some blanks at the top, and some of these slides will have the answers, and I'll try to make sure you can write them in. Florida Hospital, by the way, gave us a nice gift. They gave us these outlines. Mission development, pardon me? I have 80, and so they actually gave us 90, I think it was. And so we were asking one per family, and if they're all gone, they're gone. Sorry. There'll be another one tomorrow we're doing rest and environment tomorrow, so I'll have one each for those. These outlines are not cheap. In fact, it was a $3,500 gift that Florida Hospital gave to us this week. Maybe you can look over and share if you have one per family. If a family has more than one, maybe you can make sure if you see someone doesn't have one, maybe they can get it. Not allowed to copy them. Sorry. Okay. Choice is the first step. Now, choice is the first one you teach when you're teaching a creation health class. The trick with choice is people will agree with you intellectually that they have choice, but emotionally they disagree with you, many of them will, because of how life has treated them. But we still teach choice, because choice is a real thing, and it's the first step toward improved health. In fact, they have found if you do this smile, a real smile, a Duchenne smile, that it triggers a positive biochemical response in your body versus a fake cheese smile for the camera. So if you're feeling pretty bad in a situation, if you just choose to figure out a way to make yourself smile and to smile for real, it'll trigger a feel-good feeling in that moment. In fact, what they did was, University of Southern California, I think, is the one who did this. I can't remember. But there have been multiple projects since then that they've taken people who are depressed and they tested them against those who are seeking therapy every week and were on antidepressant medication versus those, well, this particular study, they had the folks go and stand in front of a mirror 20 minutes a day and just smile at themselves. And you can't help but laugh at yourself if you're sitting there smiling at yourself. And at the end of a few weeks, they kind of compared both groups. And you know the group that just sat there and stood there and smiled at itself, do you think it was worse than the group on the couch? It was just as good, if not better, than the group on the couch, and that was without medication. There are things we can do, choices we can make each day that despite the gloominess, that will help lighten our world and brighten our life up a little bit. They went to an assisted living home. They divided it into two groups. One group they gave choice, one group they didn't. The group that had choice was allowed to say what they wanted for breakfast, which movie they wanted to see, and they chose a plant and they watered it and gave it sunshine. The group with no choice, they were given breakfast, they were shown a movie, and they said, the nurse is getting a plant for your room, don't touch it. She's taking care of it, giving it water and sunshine. 18 months later, they went back. The researchers were shocked to see that a significant higher percentage of people in the non-choice group had died compared to those in the group with choice. And they got concerned thinking they got a higher percentage of weaker, more frail people in the non-choice group, but as they looked at it, both groups were comparatively equally healthy. And they said the independent predictor as to who lived or died was who felt like they had choice or didn't have choice. There's a groundbreaking study that made headlines, and they say to the degree that you feel like you're in charge of your life and have choice will be to the degree that you're healthy and will live longer. So what we need to do as a church is we need to work and give people their choice back. This world seems designed to make you think that it's in charge of you. It's a lie. We're in charge of us through the power of the Holy Spirit. We need to put people back in charge of their lives. Having control and the ability to choose equals living longer and happier. Okay, so in your outline, the power of choice is located in the frontal lobes. It's the command center of your brain, up here. If you've ever met anyone who was in an accident and their frontal lobes were damaged, it just changes you. Most of the time it changes you. You won't even recognize the person, how they act afterwards, it seems, in a lot of situations. It is where your will, judgment, reasoning, social norms, and long-term planning all reside. It's very important to take care of the frontal lobes. And there are things we can do to strengthen it. There are things we do that weaken it. And we're going to talk about that here in a second or two. But I just thought you'd find it interesting that the frontal lobe takes up a certain percentage of each of these creatures in your outline. In dogs, first of all, I left cats off because I didn't want to discourage any cat lovers here. And I love cats too, but in a cat, the total brain volume that's made up by the frontal lobe is about 3.5%. And they think they're God, don't they? They make you feel like you're their staff. Dogs is 7%. Total brain volume is 7%. The frontal lobe makes up 7%. Dogs are wonderful. You go to the mailbox and come back, you're gone for 30 seconds. They make you feel like you're gone for 6 months, don't they? Oops, chimpanzees. But you have 17% of the total brain volume in chimpanzees that are made up of the frontal lobe, which is pretty significant. Human beings, 35 to 38% of our total brain volume is the frontal lobe in human beings. One-third of our brain, over one-third of our brain, is the frontal lobes. I mean, we have more power under the hood than we can even begin to realize. You know this? You have any idea what we might be capable of doing? Yes, sir.
Argument against evolution.
Absolutely is. I don't see how anybody in the right mind, when they look at the research and stuff, can believe in that. You know? Thank you for that perspective. Absolutely. Because I guarantee, well, anyway, over 30% of our brains, frontal lobes. Here are things that weaken the frontal lobe. Tobacco products, alcohol. See, that's where the Seventh-day Adventist Church usually stops the conversation. I added 3 more things. And I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, lifelong. I love the church, won't ever be a member of any other church, so I'm not bashing the church. You understand? Okay. Inactivity weakens the frontal lobe. Junk food. You know, junk food every once in a while is not going to kill you. And, you know, some people in the room probably need a chocolate chip cookie or a Twinkie or something to brighten them up. Just eat it. But if you're eating it like every day, you're going to have trouble, all right? Inadequate sleep or rest. This weakens the frontal lobe. And it seems like everything in this world is designed to make sure that you're tired all the time, that you're overwhelmed all the time, that you're run down, that you're weakened, in a weakened state. Now, these are things that strengthen the frontal lobe. Choosing to think positive thoughts. Seeing the bright silver lining. Physical activity. We'll talk about it on Wednesday, but one physical exercise session will boost your mental strength for 2 to 6 hours, will put you in a better state of mind for 2 to 6 hours. If you can only do one thing, choose walking. Try to get your 10,000 steps in if you're only going to do one thing. Massage, mental activity like crossword puzzles and stuff like that strengthens the frontal lobe. Driving, actually, brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. If you put things in different places around the house to make your mind think of where you left it. You might want to leave a note of where you put it. I see you're using that one already. Okay. Massage. We think massage is a guilty pleasure, but massage actually increases blood flow throughout the body. You know what the brain says when it sees increased blood flow? It says, I get it first, because there's nutrients in increased blood flow. So if you want to have a stronger frontal lobe, go get a massage. If you can't afford it, have your spouse do it. Or a lot of places have these like massage schools where these people are going through to learn, and they'll do it for like $20 or $25, I guess. I don't know. But don't be afraid of a massage. Sunshine. Sunshine actually will restrict the flow of stress hormones and encourage the release of the happy hormone, serotonin. So if you're feeling especially stressed or anxious, go for a walk out in the sunshine for a few minutes. You'll strengthen your brain. Eating good carbohydrates, stuff like sweet potatoes, strawberries, blackberries, broccoli, cauliflower, all of that sort of stuff. Oatmeal. And listening to music that uplifts you. People have different music forms that uplift them, and I might take 3 minutes on this because I just want to give you an example. One of my closest friends at Florida Hospital actually confided in me. She says, you know my wife sings, Jennifer LaMountain, you've heard of her? Okay, so she has 6 albums, and she sings and still sings with Faith for Today. So one of my closest friends at Florida Hospital, she pulled me aside one day. She said, I just have to tell you, I have to confess. She says, your wife's music puts me in a bad mood. She says, I don't like it at all. And she liked, Newsboys and things like that, which is fine. I like Newsboys too. I happen to like my wife's music as well. But it didn't do it for her. But there are people in this room who enjoy, the inspirational music that my wife sings. The genre is inspirational. And I'm thinking, I thought back to my dad. And I remember him working his office was in the garage when we were in Texas. And at the same time when his conference president called and that whole fiasco. So I get home from school, and Dad would be working on his sermons in the garage. And back in the day, remember the old 8-track players? The 8-track tapes, of loop and loop and loop and loop. And his favorite musician was, maybe you've heard of her, Donna Klein. Organist Donna Klein. Donna Klein she's a wonderful organist. She's literally inspired and encouraged thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world. And I think she still, is involved in encouraging people. But because I heard it every day on a loop, in the house, and this is nothing about her, guess what is not on my playlist? But is there anything wrong with her music? No. And there are people that it's made a deep spiritual impact on their lives. So we all have different things when it comes to music that uplifts us, and I think we should probably, I'm convinced we're going to have food fights and music wars in the church until Jesus comes. So if you want to strengthen the frontal lobe, though, I encourage people to think of a song that they find inspiring. If they're not listening to it for a while, go get it, download it, do something, listen to it on the way to work or when they're walking. Music is a very, so the Adventist Review asked me to do an article on music a few years ago. And they printed a couple of my articles. I'm not going to fall. I know some of you are concerned I might fall off here. I wasn't concerned until I just about tripped on that wire, so I'll stay over here. So they asked me to do an article on music, and they had published a couple cover stories that I had done for them. And I sent them my article, and I didn't get any response. And so I called them like 2 months later, and they said, oh, we're still thinking about it. And what they didn't like was I actually decided I was going to come at it from a totally objective point of view because I really wanted to know about music and did a lot of research. And what I found out was, and this seems strange to me, but do you know there's actually something called the devil's instrument? See, I was raised to think that was like the drums. If you hold a drumstick, you're going to burst into flame or something like that. Turns out that in the 1700s in this country, drums weren't the devil's instrument. I don't even know if they existed, but you know what the devil's instrument was? It was the organ. It was the organ. It was called the devil's instrument. And the organ is what we worship, in the 18th, 19th, 20th, the 19th, 20th, and I don't know so much the 21st century. Actually, my mom forced me to take organ lessons at Southern College on the big pipe organ in the church. Did it for 6 months, and I couldn't take it anymore. So, I quit. I took piano lessons for 9 years, so I figured she got what she needed out of me anyway. So I wrote about the devil's instrument and did the history of music. And so I checked like 8 or 9 months after that, and they told me, oh, your article is lost in a committee in Africa someplace that's looking at it. So it's like, okay. So I wrote that in like 2006. It's 2017. I don't think they'll be publishing my article on music. There is some music that is definitely designed to bring people down. There's actually some classical music when you talk to the professionals that's designed. Wagner and things like this. I don't know classical music that well, even though I took 9 years of lessons. But there are some professionals in that industry who feel like there's classical music that's really not the healthiest for a person's emotional or spiritual, state of mind. There is some music, definitely. What the music is talking about, running around on someone or shooting somebody in the behind, or, I'm trying to say, all this stuff. There's music out there that when you're sitting at a stoplight, you can hear some of these lyrics coming through from the car next to you. And it's shocking what you're hearing. So there is some music with a language just, is not uplifting, even though that person might say it is, it isn't. But for the most part, we want to let people choose what they find inspiring, because music, if it's inspiring, if it's uplifting, what inspiring, uplifting words and songs are. That actually strengthens the frontal lobe. What I don't want, for those of you who decide to teach creation health, is to start micromanaging what people listen to or don't listen to when it comes to the music, when you take that step, okay? So that's a little bit of, sometimes I bring some creation health certification elements into this, and that's one of them. All right. It's time to wrap this up. By the way, doing nothing in your outline, doing nothing is also a choice. Some people decide they're not going to do anything about it. And one of the things they do, and this isn't bad most of the time, but after 3-4 years of a person saying, well, I'm praying about it, there's a problem there. God would like them to do something so that person can give him something to bless. Doing nothing is a choice. Good choices taken to extremes create poor outcomes, usually. Good choices taken to extremes create poor outcomes. And then you see a summary of the frontal lobe stuff. And this is just something I use when I do Creation Health seminars. I like to give people, I give them the Creation Health seminar. The Creation Health Seminar Personal Study Guide, you'll see it in the ABC. It's a 300-page thick book. You can get that if you want and get more information. And I also give them this. Yes, ma'am.
Just a thought. My husband and I go out to Colombia to go to centers, lifestyle centers.
Yep.
And I guess our burden is to put Christ back into the picture and make it the main focus. But one of the things that we have observed, though, is many times when we get caught in legalism or get caught in food fights or whatever it is,
Yep.
we need to have compassion for them. Because
Yes.
what I noticed is they feel they need to live out the lifestyle or God won't love them.
You're right. You're absolutely
And
right.
we need to know that God loves us no matter what
Amen.
we do, and there's a fruit.
Amen.
And that these people need to know not only is there a choice, but we need to see that choice is because of what Christ has done and what
Amen.
he went through, and
Amen.
he has compassion,
Amen.
and that he's the seeking Savior.
Amen.
And it turns a whole place upside
right.
down.
I really appreciate that point of view. She's right. We're not going to talk about this today. If we do a Creation Health Train the Trainer, I'll get into this. We have 6 human needs. One of those needs is the need for certainty. And so a lot of people, in order to achieve that certainty, the certainty that God loves them, the certainty that that the church is supporting them, that they're good and member in good and regular standing, they will sometimes take these things to an extreme because that process, that ritual, that belief, whatever it is, lived out, is giving them the certainty that everything is okay. So I appreciate the note on compassion. The last thing that we need is to fight fire with fire, right? And when you know the 6 human needs and how people choose to meet them, that's absolutely what people are doing. They're not trying to make our lives miserable and all this other stuff. Okay, 5 minutes. We can wrap this up. Okay, I want to go through these last 5 minutes, and I want you to just kind of evaluate your life and what you're going to do these next 5 days here in Lake Junaluska, okay? How satisfied are you with your life? I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, are you happy? Are you fulfilled with your life in general? Chances are there'll be areas of your life you're more satisfied with than others. Could be your walk with God, could be your marriage, I don't know. Could be your friends, I'm not sure. How satisfied are you with your life? God wants you to live a fulfilling, satisfying life. John 3:2 says that. He wants us to prosper in health, and just as our soul prospers. There are people who teach. There are pastors who teach in the church that it is God's will for us to suffer. It is not God's will for his children to suffer. The only time you can find in the Old Testament or in biblical history when God's children suffered is when they turned their backs on Him and walked in the opposite direction. That's the only time they suffered. God's children throughout biblical history, salvation history, have always been challenged, because resistance is the only thing that grows us, grows our character. Resistance grows our muscle. Resistance grows our character. You know what I'm saying? But there's a difference between challenges and resistance put upon us versus being abandoned to a lifestyle of suffering. God is a good father. He says, call Him Dad. He's the best dad you could ask for. And no dad, no mom who's loving wants their child to suffer. They will challenge them because they want them to grow. So how satisfied are you with your life? If you're not satisfied, realize today that you've been blessed with the power of choice. You are in charge of what happens to your life from this moment on, moving forward. You've always been in charge. And you'll know more on Friday about why you might feel like you've not been in charge. So don't miss that one. But you are in charge. And that can discourage you, because it discouraged me when I realized that I am what I choose, because I never felt like I was in charge of life. Lord blessed me and has taken me through a process the last 10 years, and I am glad that I am what I choose. I'm glad that God is a part of my life, and that regardless what happens out there, me and God, nothing we can't do. So I have to ask you this morning, which direction are your choices taking you? You don't have to be an amazing Crescent to figure out where you're going to end up. You don't have to call the psychic hotline to know where your marriage will be in 3 years from now, because your choices are stacking on themselves, forming a pattern, and they're taking you in a direction. You know the direction you're heading with your relationships, with your walk with God, with your finances. You know with your health. And the question you have to ask this morning is, are you happy with that direction? If you are, great. If you're not, great, because you can choose that direction. In fact, they say that there's anything worse than going in the wrong direction. It's going in the wrong direction enthusiastically. So just make a choice to change. We don't have to make a Hollywood movie out of it. We just change. They say that Neil Armstrong and airplane pilots off course 90% of the time. You're going to veer off course. Now, I don't understand why astronauts would be off course, because there's no friction once you get out of the atmosphere, right? I don't get it. Airplane pilots make sense. Tailwinds, headwinds, barometric changes and everything. But, okay, let's go with it. Let's say they're off course 90% of the time. If they can zigzag their way to the final destination, then I think we can zigzag our way through life a little bit. If things haven't been going the way you want them to, please, don't be mean to yourself. There are enough people out there lining up to do that already. Don't be mean to yourself. Life happens. Sometimes you get diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. Sometimes you get sick out of the blue. Last spring, 2016, I was diagnosed. I actually thought I had liver cancer or pancreatic cancer, and because I just lost my dear friend Gail Tucker to stage 4 pancreatic cancer that metastasized to her liver. And, so I got sick and I had the same symptoms. And so they did tests for 10 days and they found out I had CMV hepatitis. It's a virus that 80% of us in the room have, and it chose to attack my liver. And I thank God it did, because if it attacks your eyes, your ears, you have a strong chance of going deaf or blind. My liver was strong because I don't drink and all that other stuff. And so I was sick for 3 months, lost 40 pounds in 6 weeks. I gained back 45 pounds, 5 more, because once you go through that, your body goes on automatic, and it forces you to have cravings you can't control to make you get that weight back on. And then once you get the weight back on, it has a new standard because it thinks it might get sick again, and it makes it even doubly hard for you to lose the weight that you regained. So I've been stuck with cravings up until 4 weeks ago. And now I've been trying to work out to lose 15 pounds, getting ready. We just filmed season 4 of Lifestyle, and I looked fat on camera. I know I did. And we're doing another few episodes in November, and I have until November to lose these 15 pounds to get where I feel good. Sometimes life just happens, and you can't do anything about it. You just take it easy, you go with the flow, and do the best you can. I want to encourage you today that regardless of where you are in your life, you're just one choice away from living a better life right now. One choice. When it comes to health, if you forget everything I've said today, please remember this. When it comes to your health, it's about progress, not perfection. It's about progress, not perfection. Progress equals happiness. Some weeks there'll be 2 steps forward, some weeks there'll be 4 steps back. But just keep progressing and moving forward, and it's going to be okay. Because this doesn't just define us these few years here. We have eternity we're looking towards. I mean, what's 80 or 90 years here when you're comparing it against that? You have time. So take a deep breath. Decide whatever in your life that God wants you to get some focus on this week while you're here in this beautiful area. Is it your walk with Him? Is it your relationships? Is it your physical health? Is it something else? Pray to Him and have the Holy Spirit open up your minds as to what He wants you to focus on this week. And let this be the kickstart to getting some momentum and going in the direction that you know in your heart you really want to go. Because you're only one choice away from living a better life. And it's up to you to make that choice. You can make that choice, and I'm praying you'll make that choice today, this morning. And it's time for us to close. I'll be around for a few minutes, but I'm going to have prayer. If you have some questions, you can ask me afterwards, but let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for being the best dad in the universe we could ever hope or ask for. We thank you for being in this room. We thank you for being in our hearts. I pray, Lord, that your will be done this week, that you'd take us and transform us and equip us and use our thoughts, minds, words, friendships. Use us as channels of your grace to a world that is suffering and in need. Help us deliver hope to the hopeless and help those who need help. Father, use us to let people know just how wonderful and awesome you are. And please transform our lives so that we're good examples, not of perfection, but of people who are living in the joy of the Lord and whose lives are making a difference in this world. Please bless my friends this morning as they go to the next meeting. May your will be done and bring us back tomorrow safely. We pray in your name. Amen. Thank you.